Whether you're headed to the office or off to the gym or anywhere in between, well-made, hand-stitched projects can serve you well. Today, we are discussing some common stitches, so let's get started. We will be reviewing 5 different stitches. We'll start with 3 straight stitches, the running stitch, saddle stitch, and whip stitch. Then we will move on to these 2 joining stitches, the cross or X stitch and box stitch. Starting with the running stitch, you'll notice the stitch only uses 1 thread and 1 needle. It passes from the front to back and back to front and continues repeating. For this, insert the needle in the next hole. Push the needle through, pull it tight, and insert the needle into the next hole. For this example, I'm using 1.2 millimeter tiger thread in the 5 millimeter Tandy Pro diamond chisel stitching holes. Continue sewing to the end of the stitch line. At this point, you can end your stitch line, or if you'd prefer, continue sewing back through the gaps in your stitch line by inserting your needle and continuing back the way you came. Next, the saddle stitch. Also with 1.2 millimeter tiger thread and 5 millimeter Tandy Pro diamond chisels. Consistency for this stitch is a must. You'll notice here I made an intentional error to demonstrate. I passed the needles in the incorrect order, making a glaring mistake. So pick left or right, whichever is more comfortable, and stick with it. Pass your needle through, leaving a loop. Pull the needle toward you in the back and pass the other needle through and into the loop. Then pull tight. Whatever order and direction, stick with it, or your stitches will look messy. Repeat to the end, and for more information and detailed instructions, check out our video on saddle stitching. For the final straight stitch, let's look at the whip stitch. We are using the same thread and spacing here. Like the running stitch, the whip stitch uses only 1 thread and needle. But instead of passing back and forth from front to back, this stitch wraps around and feeds through the same side every time. As it cinches, make sure to adjust it so that it lays correctly and parallel with your previous stitches. You can also adjust them as you go. Continue repeating this until you reach the end of your stitch line. Functionally, you want to use the running stitch in spots that won't be seen, as it is rather messy. The whip stitch is good for decorative stitching and can even be used with lace and super thick leathers. And the saddle stitch is the most durable and commonly used, so do your best to master this one as quickly as possible. For the box stitch, you will use an awl to create a steep angle for the needle. This stitch creates 90-degree angles, unlike most stitches that lay flat. Pass both needles back and forth like the saddle stitch, using the same level of consistency. Please note, this is not one of the more beginner-friendly stitches, but can be very useful when learned. For the cross stitch, you have several options. Here, I'll demonstrate 2 techniques, tightly packed with no gaps, or a space between. For the gap method, you can feed the needles to the front, then layer over each other. This creates what looks like a running stitch from behind. As always, make sure to maintain a consistent order of operations. Alternatively, you can pack the X's more densely by crossing the needles in the back, then continuing to cross in the front until the end of the stitch line. That's the end of part 3 of this series. While we went over 5 of the common stitches, in part 4 we will be going over how to start and end different stitch lines, so stay tuned. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more leatherwork education, and as always, happy crafting!